All righty. Robbie Baker, my friend. How you doing?
Man, I'm fantastic, Colin. How are you, brother?
I am doing well. Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time, man, out of your day. I know you're super busy, end of year, getting ready for 2025. But let's kind of start this episode of Real Estate is Local by really doing a little guest spotlight. Why don't you tell everybody, where you're from, your background, all that good stuff?
Yeah, man. Well, appreciate you having me for sure. I'm out of the Knoxville, Tennessee market. We are home to the University of Tennessee, so it's kind of a college town market. I've lived here for going on 25 years. I moved from Northeast Tennessee, Bristol, where I grew up. So I've lived in Tennessee my whole life. I moved down here to play baseball in college, just a little south of here, about 30 minutes south of here, at a small liberal arts school, Maryville College, and got my business degree there. And yeah, I have sort of had this genetic disposition for entrepreneurship.
Don't we all?
I grew up in a family full of business owners and entrepreneurs, and I'm surrounded by my siblings are all in business for themselves. So it's sort of just in the blood, man. Yeah, but yeah, live here in West Knoxville, in a community known as Farragut, Tennessee. It is one of the nicer communities in Knoxville. Definitely, as far as home prices go, it's definitely on the high end.
Yeah. What's the average list price in your area, give or take?
For Knoxville as a whole, we're the median price is around 370,000. For the town that I live in, it's closer to 850.
Okay.
So there's some disparity there, and the Knoxville market is pretty broad, though. It goes about an hour in every direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's definitely an interesting market. Obviously, hey, go Vols, right? We've talked about that.
For sure.
Um, we were down there at EXPCon, met some other Tennessee Vol fans. That was interesting, right? A couple of
Yeah,
nice folks there.
yeah.
Um,
There's a specific familiarity to fellow Vol fans. I mean, it's very much as a family. The fandom of college football in this area is like nothing you've ever experienced, and it's not just an in-season fandom. You're going to see the color orange in this area 365, man. Like
Absolutely.
it is a hardcore Vol fan nation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so they're good now, right? But tell me how it is when times are tough, right? Is everybody, because I'm down here in Florida and there's a lot of Gators fans that have a lot of pride, and it's been a rough year for them and Florida State as well.
Man, I'm glad you asked that. The reality is the local economy is so heavily tied to the success of that football team. And yeah, you say good now. We have been mediocre at best for almost 2 decades. Last time we won a national championship was 1998. But we've made some changes in the athletic department over the last 4 or 5 years. We brought in a new football coach, Josh Heupel, who's led us to the college football playoff in its inaugural
Nice.
year. We brought in Tony Vitello to run our baseball program, who just won a College World Series. And then we've had an incredible basketball program, historic basketball program. The Pat Summit's probably arguably the greatest women's basketball coach of all time. God rest her soul. And then, our men's basketball team is a Final Four contender, Elite Eight, Sweet 16 Final Four contender every year. So our sports economy is growing, so to speak. And when the Vols are doing well, the local business is doing well. The last couple of decades, we didn't have a lot of talk about. So
That's awesome, man. Well, so we could talk college football and athletics all day long,
for
right?
sure.
But let's circle back to you specifically, right? Like what, entrepreneurship goes all over the place, right? I mean, you literally can do anything in America. Why real estate? Why realtor specifically?
Man, that's a fantastic question. So my initial decision to go into real estate was more driven on the mindset of becoming an investor, and a license to buy and sell homes, giving me an advantage to insights and potential inventory prior to the rest of the world knowing about it. I mean, anyone can search on Zillow for properties and analyze them as they're good deals, but if you're in the active daily activity of acquiring potential deals, things change, and every solution or every single opportunity is not something I would want to buy, right? But that stems from a story that goes back to like 2005, I think 2005. Right out of college, I was on a path to be a hedge fund manager. I really wanted to go to Wall Street, and I had this really strong desire to understand the investment world and really create investment wealth. And so I wanted to help people with that because I watched, how successful my dad had been in business and how well he'd invested it. And in 2005, all that changed. My dad was invested heavily with a hedge fund manager, and this hedge fund manager committed fraud and went to prison. And my dad lost almost everything he'd worked his whole life for.
Wow.
Had he not taken a significant amount of money and bought single family and commercial real estate, my mom would probably be bagging groceries right now.
Wow.
But fortunately, she gets checks in the mailbox every single month and has for the last 20 years. My dad passed away 9 years ago. My mom's, fortunately, outside of raising 4 kids, she's never had to hold down a job outside of work because my dad invested that money in real estate. So when I made a decision to leave corporate America in 2021, a little over 3 years ago, and go into real estate, it was driven by the fact that I didn't want anyone else in control of the security of my income but myself. And I knew that I could help people with the analyzing of properties, analyzing investments, making strong investment decisions, preparing long-term, and invest in something they can go see and touch versus just as a hedge fund manager where they've just got to trust me to make wise investment decisions every day. And seeing firsthand what a hedge fund manager did to destroy my family, I definitely knew that wasn't the path. So that real estate was driven by the success and security my dad provided through investing in real estate for my mom.
So what you're saying is your dad used real estate to out hedge the hedge fund manager.
Yeah, luckily he didn't put all his eggs in one basket, but he did lose a significant amount of wealth, and did definitely in his final, decade or so was not living anywhere near as comfortably as we grew up. I grew up very, very, very fortunate. He had a very successful earth moving contracting company. I watched him build that business with my uncles, and then subsequently separate it into 3 different companies. And my other 2 uncles' businesses have now passed down to their sons. My brother owns a construction company. My other brother is a partner in another construction company. So we've been moving dirt and creating real estate and infrastructure in Tennessee for 50 years.
Nice. That's amazing, man.
Yeah,
so, specifically the real estate background is always unique. That's an amazing story though. Like with your dad, and I'm a stock fan myself. I the same way though, right? Like I started stock, wound up real estate in a way, but learning them both, I love it because I can understand like what's in my 401k, but at the same time, like I've got a couple rentals myself. Cash flow is king. But anyway, right. Back to you, man. So you are the TikTok guy, right? What inspired you to specifically like highlight that local market, like using social media, right? Was it the college there? Like being, you have a lot of younger homeowners probably that come out of college from the big, University of Tennessee and buy around there, right? Like are you hitting that market? Like what inspired you to do that? And like what are some other ways like you showcase a home when you list it using social media?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. So first, why social media, right? Well, studies have been shown that a lot of people use it. And when I was initially getting my business started, with a background in sales, I spent almost 10 years in sales. And the old mindset was you got to build a list of prospects to reach out to cultivate potential leads, to cultivate potential deals. And so building a sales pipeline wasn't new to me. However, traditional real estate prospecting was very unattractive. Like I don't want someone random knocking on my front door in the middle of the day and interrupting what I'm doing, getting my dog all riled up. I don't want my work day interrupted by a cold caller. And I just didn't want to have to, I didn't want to build the skills to just deal with that every single day. I think that's mind-numbing work. And I just thought there was a better way. I knew there was a better way. And I knew, honestly, from 10 years in wireless sales, that the level of addiction and distraction that exists in that little handheld device we all carry around.
Oh, yeah.
I needed a pattern interrupt. I needed to figure out how to do pattern interrupt on that device. But I knew that if I could create valuable content that would actually help people move forward, help people know more about me, help me build trust, that those conversations were going to be a whole lot easier and on someone else's time frame. 99% of the people we talk to every single day don't have any desire to do real estate in the next 12 months.
Right.
And so we can spend all day fishing for the 1%, or we can build a relationship with all 100% and be their go-to person when the time came. So that's why TikTok. I realized that there was just more eyeballs and more exposure that I could get on a shift in brand from being a corporate sales trainer to a real estate agent. I can make that shift in brand very quickly. Mm-hmm. And then second of all, there's a large demographic of people using the app currently, assuming it doesn't get banned in the US. Right. And so I use that platform specifically to learn how to do short form video effectively. From there, it just became fun, like having some humor in it, letting your personality come out, whether it's doing green screen videos, talking about properties, walking people through property tours, talking about celebrities that are thinking about buying houses in my area. And I had a post a video on TikTok that Bryce Harper, the Philadelphia Phillies slugger, was looking at buying houses in Tennessee as a tax shelter. I green screened an article, talked about it on the morning of the 4th of July, and man, I had 400,000 views on that video. Whoa. And I'm sitting poolside. How long would it take me to make that many phone calls to introduce myself to the world? And that's when the light bulb sort of went off. It's like, hey, look, I'm at the center of the internet here. And if I can create content that people find valuable, entertaining, humor in, they could connect with me in some way, man, maybe I can build a little bit of an audience that may potentially do business with me down the road. And if not, great. I feel like the business is unlimited.
Yeah, no, man, that's incredible. I have a couple of friends now that like make money on TikTok, and it's just still wild to me, right? But that being said, you're so right. I mean, I'm going to be 27 tomorrow. Actually, it's kind of random, right? But I would say my age group, they're so much more likely. Like my girlfriend is never going to see you unless you're doing what you're doing. Like she's never going to see you. Right. And the TikTok thing is just everybody's a screen addict in my generation, right? I mean, I'm sorry if I offend anybody that's not, right? But that being said, it's like such a good way to do it. And honestly, some of the videos are really cool too. Like some of the different types of content is really cool. That Bryce Harper thing, right? Easy, you'd think. Sports fan, checks it out, listens to you. That green screen thing is awesome for sure.
Honestly, man, I made the video with the thought that, hey, there's no chance he sees this, but if he does, maybe he'll hire me to buy that house. And it was sort of a sarcastic humor. And man, there was so many opinions in those comments. And I was like, oh, I've got a formula here.
Yeah, right. I mean, we were kind of just talking like on our call before we hopped on about that. Like sometimes being controversial actually can like generate, like a lot of people like to give their opinion. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, so let's kind of move it like specifically for a couple minutes right to the market of Knoxville. Like, what are you seeing, man? Are you seeing more buyers than sellers? Are you seeing, is it a balanced mix? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, currently we're at about 45 days on market average, which is like 27, 28 days median. That's a pretty long time based on the last 4 years. We, typically 2 weeks for a median days on market is pretty normal. At least over the last 3 years, it has been. And when I first got into the business, we had maybe at most 3,200 active listings at a time. I mean, it was tight. There was such low inventory. We're over 6,500 listings, just under 6,500 listings as I sit today, with that higher days on market. And I think this has just been a culmination of people needing to make moves. They've procrastinated on making them because of higher interest rates or whatever reason. And now they're making moves, and the buyers that had to buy with the higher interest rates and in the tighter market have done so. And so some of those opportunities, opportunity to borrow money is a lot more expensive. It's slowed things down. I would still say at four months of inventory, we're still in a seller's market, but it's becoming more and more balanced every day. I'm seeing the buyers are able to negotiate much better terms, whether it's getting concessions to purchase, points to buy their rate down, or getting their closing costs covered. So they're preserving as much cash as possible to come to the closing table. Man, I put a new construction under contract, and usually the tract home builders specifically don't negotiate. They just, here's the price. If you want it, great. And if you don't, someone else is going to come buy it. Fine. And that's been my experience. But this tract home, man, we put it under contract. We got it for like $20,000 under list, and they gave $29,000 in concessions, like $50,000 off of a new construction. The one caveat is we have to close it before the end of the year. So they wanted it off their books. We found a builder that was motivated, but
hey,
the people that are taking action despite interest rates, despite pricing, they're able to negotiate terms that actually are pretty favorable.
This is the best time of year to buy a house, in my opinion. I've bought two processes: spring for one, winter for the first one. I mean, the attorney wasn't busy, the title people weren't busy. Everybody kind of moved, the process zipped right along. And like, that was in New York State where we've got attorneys involved. So, but yeah, I love buying this time of year. And you're so right. Like, this is the time right now while everybody else is kind of waiting to see what happens. Like, this is the time to go find a deal and buy one.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you're in the market to buy a house and you can afford to make the payments, that's the biggest thing. Is don't buy something you can't afford.
No.
But if you can afford to make the payments, the amount of inventory that's available is really helping you get real negotiable on price and terms. And if you see something that's been sitting on market 30 days or more, that seller no longer has the upper hand in negotiations. And if they really need to sell it, you're able to take a swing at things and convert on some good opportunities.
Yeah, man. No, you're 100% there. It's just, everybody likes to balk at the seller credit thing always. And obviously I'm a lender, so the buy side is what we do. And it's just such an easy way for a seller to just like take a step back and realize the buyer oftentimes is actually still borrowing that money. It's not necessarily like you're losing funds. You're just accepting a different offer. And obviously you and I could go back and forth on that, all day. Right. But in terms of like, what's in demand in your market, right? Is it like down here in Polk County? It's tough. You have just this heavy mix of new builds down here where you've got the Southern Homes, DR Hortons, they're just building everywhere. And so I would say like that's in demand here, right? Like, is there a lot of that goes on in Knoxville? Is it traditional style homes?
Yeah, the stuff that moves the quickest is anything in that, 350 to 450 range. Obviously anything beneath that too, but that 350 to 450 range is supplying housing to majority of the migration that we're getting. Tennessee is definitely growing. Knoxville, Nashville's probably grown the most. And it's honestly starting to slow down in Nashville, and people are starting to move further east. So we're seeing a lot more incoming migration to Knoxville, even up into the Tri-Cities of Bristol, Kingsport, and Johnson City, right on the northeast Tennessee border. You're seeing a lot of migration there, and gradually we're going to see more and more of that. So that target demographic is young families in that 25 to 45 age range, we're seeing a lot more of those types of migrants. And then, the housing median 350 to 450, man, that you build that house, they sell. And so DR Horton definitely cleaning house around here. We've got a couple local builders that are doing really well too. So a lot of new construction. I also think that Tennessee, this particular area, because of its location to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, is really primed with investing. There's a lot of real estate investors that are buying fixer-uppers around the campus area and rehabbing old homes, but you're also seeing a lot of people acquiring cabins up in the Smoky Mountains that they can run Airbnb. And so a lot of people see this area as a vacation rental market because of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And for the longest time, we were in the top 5, I think, globally for Airbnb markets, just because majority of the overnight rentals up in the mountains are single family cabins.
Huh? No kidding, man. I'll have to check that out. We haven't visited Tennessee yet, but it's on the list for sure. I mean, so it's interesting you brought up the investing side, right? Because I have a similar background as you. I got into this kind of similar reasons, right? I really wanted to understand how's the sausage made, right? Like, people buy these things, they sell them all the time, varying intellect levels, right? As well, right? You have some people who are doctors and lawyers. You have some people who never went to college, dropped out of high school, build homes with their bare hands, make a good home, sell a good home, make a good buck, right?
Right.
So, but if I called you and I said, hey man, I'm trying to buy, in that market, what do you like? What's a good neighborhood? Like, what's a good property type, right? Is it a good duplex market? What's available? Obviously, single family in the mountains, right? For Airbnb.
That's a great question, man. One of the biggest needs we have for housing in this particular area is student housing around the University of Tennessee. I've got a sophomore who's living in a sorority house currently, but she's going to have to find a place to live next year, or is choosing to live off campus in her own place rather than coming home to stay with dad. And they're looking at rentals within walking distance to campus being as much as $1,500 a bedroom.
Wow.
So $5,000 for a 4-bedroom house is mind blowing to me.
Whoa.
Because you come over on the west end of Knoxville, and a 3 to 4 bedroom house might be $2,500 to $3,000 a month. So that student housing demand is so high that the rent prices are out of control. So we're seeing a lot of multifamily developments going in there, luxury apartments, townhomes. A lot of that stuff's being built there. And I think that if I'm investing in this area, I think that I'd be investing to solve that problem more than just to create some cash flow. I think that if you're wanting to park money, a safe place to do it's buying cabins on the mountain.
Okay.
If you're into rehabbing homes, or even creating like furnished rentals, because I've got some investors that do a lot of that. The UT Medical Center complex there around the campus does a lot of travel nursing, and they bring in a lot of different people. So those short-term 90-day furnished rentals, they absolutely crush it. And you don't have to deal with the Airbnb regulations and all that, because in Knoxville proper, in order to be able to operate an unoccupied Airbnb, it has to be on commercially zoned property. It cannot be in a residential area. And so working around those zoning regulations has been something you've seen a lot of people get creative with. But if it's in a commercially zoned area, it's fair game. So like some of the downtown lofts that we see that are on Airbnb, they've built themselves on top of a bank.
Okay, yeah. So that's what I was going to say, right? Like you got a commercial building, you just build a loft upstairs, rent it out. Type of situation, huh?
But there's just none of those for sale, man. You got people that have a vision that go in and create them. You're not going to see somebody sell that once they have it, because it draws so much for downtown.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Yeah, man. I mean, there's just so many different unique ways to do it, right? So it's interesting to hear you can basically go safer on the single family side of things, right? Like you were talking about. And even like the thought of Airbnb on a mountain being like a safe spot too, right? Like, but it makes sense. I see those videos all the time of those Smoky Mountain cabins with the views, man. Like it's awesome.
I think it comes down to the type of investor you are. What type of investing do you like? If you like rehabbing homes, man, I think you can put money in South Knoxville. You can put money in East Knoxville, and you can make some pretty good returns. Flipping, rehabbing, or just rehabbing and holding. I don't know if we're in a place money wise where rates are good enough to get a full burr out of something.
Right.
But I'm seeing a lot of opportunities to buy houses that need a lot of renovation. You know what you're doing there, and you've got a good team of people on the ground. South Knoxville, East Knoxville, you can make some money.
Yeah. And just for, the people that are watching that aren't investment nerds like us, you want to break down what a burr is for everybody real quick?
Yeah. So burr is buy, rehab, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So you buy the property, you force the value through rehabbing it. You get a renter in there to stabilize the income on it, and then you go back to the bank, have it appraised, refinance to pull your initial down payment out, and then you repeat the process. So essentially, with a full burr, you could take one house down payment and create a rental portfolio over and over and over again. But the numbers need to make sense.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and for the other people that are listening to this as well, I just discovered this week a lot of different unique opportunities in the short-term space for this with like a DSCR loan.
Mm-hmm.
That type of loan is based on, it's not necessarily you or I qualifying, right? It's my credit score. And hey, what kind of income is that property going to generate, right?
Yeah.
That has to cover that debt and service that. But if it does, hey, you're golden. So,
Sure.
Unique opportunity where you could potentially turn something from a normal single family, right, long-term rental into a short-term, and then, hey, be able to refi that thing out with a little bit more cash flow. So unique opportunities there for that. But listen, let's do the rapid fire round, man. This has been great, by the way. I feel like I feel like I'm ready to invest in Knoxville, by the way. I'm gonna have to call you after this.
I got you.
All right. So this one's gonna be super simple, right? This is a layup. What's the first step you recommend if you get a call from somebody, let's say, college student just gets their first job out of UT. Hey, Robbie, what do I do? How do I buy a house? How do I start the process? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the easiest question. It's you've got to go through your financing and make sure that a lender is going to pre-approve you for what you want, right? And so going through that pre-approval process will be step number one. Is connecting with a lender that's knows their stuff, that's got the experience that we partner with. Partner with some great lenders like yourself. And you get a good idea of what you can actually afford, and if that's what you want to break into, or whether you need to get your income and your savings up so you can afford a little more.
Yeah, man.
I think that's step number one. You're going to waste a bunch of time searching and dreaming, and then you can't buy, and you feel misguided.
It's really tough when you have people come to you on my side of things that have done the Zillow shopping beforehand. Maybe they haven't found Robbie yet. They haven't watched you on TikTok. So they don't really know, hey, I got to find a realtor, because every realtor you talk to will say, hey, you got to talk to a lender, right? Because, hey, you really got to figure out what your budget is. I hate to say this, like, and be blunt, but like, don't be delusional. Like, if you can't make a $2,000 a month rent payment, you have to be realistic with the idea of going into it. Hey, I'm not gonna be able to pay $2,500 a month for a mortgage, right? The bank is going to look at that, but it's the best place to start, because you get that budget and you get an idea. And even if you can't qualify, like, hey, we'll put a timeline together for you. So
one of the biggest hesitations that I see is that people have this fear of having their credit pulled. And like when you're going through a pre-approval process, maybe you can speak to this. I mean, that's not a hard credit inquiry until they apply for the loan, right? Or is it a soft pull, or is it a hard credit inquiry?
Completely depends on the situation, right? I mean, generally speaking, but I will say this: anybody that's going to issue you a pre-approval, and this is for people that are trying to differentiate between I shouldn't say a good lender and a bad lender. What I would say is a thorough lender versus somebody that's, just kind of like a call center style, right? Where they won't ask for anything. They'll just give you a pre-approval letter, right? Whereas a good, strong lender is going to ask a lot of questions and really try to figure it out. And so for me, it's like, listen, if we're going to give a letter, we need to know you're going to close because of two reasons. Number one, it's horrible for your morale. You're not going to come back. You're going to be a renter for at least a decade. If I scare you, you know what I mean? And you go and you get under contract and you're excited and then the whole thing falls apart because couldn't qualify. Right. And then the second reason is, obviously out of respect for my realtor partners, but in their time, right? Like, hey, if you're going to take a realtor and say, hey, Robbie, go show me these homes, you got to respect that person's time. You got to get a hard pull. You got to give that lender some pay stubs. You got to have a verification document done. We need to know where you work, where you live, what you've got. And if we're comfortable with all of those things, man, we run with it. Right. So, to answer that in a different way, I would say people shouldn't be scared of the hard pull even, in the sense that there are a lot of people out there who rate shop, right? Which means, apply at multiple banks. I have a lot of credit building guys that hit us up and always, they're our partners, right? We talk all the time. They teach us, educate us. To my knowledge, a hard pull is not going to do anything unless you're applying to like 30 to 50 banks at the same time in the same day. And the other myth behind this too, Robbie, is like, well, it's going to drop my credit score 2 points. Well, in the mortgage world, if it's above a 750, right? Like generally, like let's say it's a 758 versus a 755, there's no difference in pricing there, generally speaking. So, it's kind of like you said, it's the big boogeyman in the closet, really, the credit pull.
So the second question that I have to that is, so thanks for clarifying that, because that's something that, a lot of buyers that hesitate to take action with connecting with a lender have. The second thing is, well, I might go with this other bank. I might go with this friend of mine who's a lender, get pre-approved through your lender sort of makes me obligated, and I don't want to have my credit pulled a whole bunch of times. Isn't there a window like that they're able to get multiple inquiries on the same type of purchase where it's not going to count but for one hard inquiry anyway?
Yeah, it's a general, it's a 30-day rule, generally speaking.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, most of the time, it's interesting. Like most of the time, if anybody even does shop, so as a lender, like when I pull your credit, I can see other inquiries, right? So I can see if you've been shopping around, and generally speaking, know that and approach that accordingly as well. Which is like, hey, if you're going to shop with a lender, tell the lender you're shopping, because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't do you any justice to go shop me if I don't know you're doing it. Not advising anybody to do that, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, listen, we can see that you have multiple inquiries. We know that. And generally, the more people you get involved with the process sometimes can create more headaches as well. And this as being working with buyers, a local lender's pre-approval letter has so much more weight to it than, your typical mortgage shop call center. Fill it out online. Don't give any documents, get a pre-approval. That stuff tends to scare, seasoned buyers agents.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So, all right, man. Well, so all right, while we're on the topic there of that, right? In things that make people hesitate, what's the biggest mistake that you generally see a buyer make in your market, or, when they're working with you, over the course of your career?
That's a great question. The biggest mistake I think buyers make is they underestimate the amount of emotional energy that they have. I think that every buyer has an emotional bank account. Okay. And none of us know how much is actually in the account. So imagine you've got a bank account and a debit card, and every time you swipe it, there's a withdrawal, but you don't know what the balance is. And then one day there's just nothing left in the account and you get declined. I think buyers that underestimate what that capacity is look at a bunch of homes. They're on Zillow all night, deep into the morning. They favorited 50 properties. They're looking at the drip campaigns or the email campaigns that I'm sending them with specific niche properties for the search that they've set up, which I've carefully curated and detailed, in addition to all of the Zillow scrolling and all the homes.com or whatever portal they're looking through. And they're getting excited on the surface to great photography, great media. And they're spending a lot of times being indecisive, looking at a ton of homes. And then they hit bankruptcy in that emotional bank account, and they get tired of the search. And one of two things happens. Man, they put it on the back burner until they've now lost equity, or they've put themselves in a position where they can't compete anymore, or they pull the trigger on something they're not in love with because they're just tired.
Yeah.
And so,
and then they hate everybody after that too. They hate the lender, they hate the realtor, they hate the title person, they hate themselves. You know, generally, like, it's just not a good experience.
So the way that I combat that is I talk about the emotional bank account. And then I say, hey, look, I'm going to send you a bunch of properties, and you're probably going to get really overwhelmed. And you're probably going to see 20 that you love. Send me all 20. Because before I schedule an appointment to go walk through those properties and spend money from the emotional bank account, I want to have conversations about the location. I want to have conversations about how they feel about the neighborhood or the school system, or what research they've done about that property specifically. I want to make sure that it matches the actual criteria that we've been searching on. Because if all of a sudden they send me a pretty home, but it doesn't have enough bedrooms, or it doesn't have the office they said was a deal breaker, let's not spend money from the account. And that's not coming from an agent that doesn't want to show 20 homes. I'll show 50 homes. I don't care how many homes you go look at. I just don't know how much is going to be left in the account. And the last thing I want is for you to pull the trigger on a home that isn't a heck yes for you because you're tired, or you put it on the back burner for 2 more years and then you're priced out of the market and you're a lifetime renter.
Interesting. The emotional bank, I'm gonna have to write that down. I'm gonna steal that for sure.
Well,
like, this is the benefit of doing this, man. Like, everybody's got a different process, and like hearing people guide their clients through like helps me so much. I think, right? Like with mine.
Well, it works the same way with the seller, right? So they're wanting to list their home, and man, there's not a single one of us on the planet that doesn't want the most money for our home unless we're desperate for a sale.
Right.
All of us want to maximize our deal, but they push that price point and then they don't get any showings. And I show them the data of how many people have looked at the property, but how many people have not gone to take a look, like not actually gone to walk through it. Or they get a ton of showings right out of the gate and no one writes an offer because they walk in there and they go, the value of this property does not, match the price. And they get discouraged. And the more times that they've had to pack up their kids and their dogs and clean their kitchen and their bathroom at the last minute to accommodate a showing that just is kicking tires in their mind.
Yep.
The more disengaged they become, and sooner or later they'd rather just take it off the market and try in the spring or whatever, as opposed to getting it right priced or making some sort of adjustment to the staging or presentation, or fixing the daggum hole in the wall that you ignored on my initial walkthrough. Like, sometimes it's
frustrating.
Sometimes taking the advice of the agent is a good decision, even if it costs you a little money on the front end. But I don't get upset with that. I just know that bank account is there, and it applies to sellers and to buyers. So just keeping that in mind, in the back of my mind when I'm talking to my clients.
Man, it's funny. The next question we were going to rip through would be, hey, same for the sellers, right? So I'm happy you said that and covered that. But I would almost say, in terms of like, because I'm always buyer side, right, perspective. But but that being said, I deal a lot with offers in situations where, hey, usually my lane is the numbers, right? I'm not going to try too much to structure an offer. Generally, you're going to know that as the local expert. Like, hey, Robbie, can we get a seller credit on this or can't we? Right. And then we kind of structure the offer that way. But generally, it's still your wheelhouse, right? Sure. But it's amazing you described that situation, because I'm going to steal the emotional bank account thing, right? But I had to put in a perspective for a buyer this week, like, that wanted to continue to, they had put in a couple offers that just weren't getting accepted because they just weren't strong offers. But and they didn't understand that. But the truth is every time you're a buyer, you have to put yourself in the position of selling your home, right? Imagine you live in a home for 20 years and you raise your kids there. Like, how much emotion is tied to that? Like, spiritually, whatever you want to say, juju, whatever, like in that house. So then visualize that, right? Like, this person wants the most for their home, the same way you will after you buy it and you sell it. So just think about that though, right? And like, people are people too. That's the other thing that drives me nuts. Like, deals are roller coasters all the way through to the end, because of emotion generally. So,
yeah, very, very much so. Very much so.
Absolutely. Well, listen, so one last piece while we're still on, the Knoxville area properties.
Sure.
Like, if I'm going to buy a house in Knoxville, right? An example of this question would be like, hey, what's 3 things a buyer should look for, right? Like in my hometown in Northern New York, right? You look at the basement, you want to see if there's water down there, right? You look at the roof, you want to make sure there's no damage from the winter. What does a typical Knoxville home, have? Do they have basements? Is it all brick on slab? And what do you usually recommend to buyers that are looking like to look out for?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's not called Rocky Top for any reason. There's a lot of rock in the ground up here.
Mhm.
So, depending on whether you're building a home or whether you're buying an existing home, foundation stability is a big one. I include foundation inspections. I've partnered with a really good company here that does them, and I've got a good friend that represents them, and he'll go in and he'll check crawl spaces and he'll check foundations for cracking or settling, because the earth just shifts. So that's a big one. A lot of lenders, more often than not, are going to require some sort of termite inspection. So I ask that we include that in the home inspection. I never skip a home inspection. I think that that's a huge mistake. And even when, we were dealing with 40 different offers on a single property, if you're not going to know what you're buying, you're taking way too big of a risk. And so I'm big on home inspection, but home inspection, termite inspections, and then foundation. I don't skip it on new construction either. Just because it's a brand new home doesn't mean that we didn't miss anything. So
Right.
Get an objective third party set of eyes on it that knows what to look for to make sure that things are finished. While I have a huge, vast array of knowledge in the construction industry and I grew up around it, I still want a third party opinion,
Yeah.
While I can see a lot of flaws within homes, I think that it's always best for the client to get someone else to say it first, rather than me being the one that's so critical. Because I will talk a buyer right out of buying a home through a walkthrough because I have too much experience there. I'd rather talk them out of it on day one than let them get 30 days into it and find out they're buying a house that's coming down.
It's really funny when they come to you and you're, because we're both in sales roles in our own regard, right?
Sure.
But people just have such a strange perception of how this all goes. And generally, like I really enjoy talking to the agents that are real with their clients like that. Like I will lose a client telling them not to do something financially.
Yeah.
If they're going to go, listen, I'm not going to argue with you, right? It's your choice. It is your life. That being said, when you become mortgage poor after you buy a house that's outside of the budget that we discussed that you're comfortable with, you hate me. So I'd rather just not have you hate me. Like, you can go, So.
Well, my mentor always says, a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. And that stuck with me. And, for the longest time, I've been a sales trainer. I've been in sales for more than a decade. And I used to think that salespeople converting deals and closing deals was a sign of a good salesperson. And while metrics are important, we need to measure what matters and we need to have some sort of understanding of conversion rates. Sales is simply helping people make a decision, whether it's a decision not to buy or a decision to buy. being great at asking questions and being a guide and a source of information to help people make the most informed decision possible is the job of a real estate agent. It's not to convince them to buy this house or that house for whatever reason. The minute you're trying to do something for me, I'm already in the wrong. Yeah. So as an agent, I pride myself on asking tough questions and making them really think about what the right decision is to make. But at the end of the day, when they make the decision, I want them to feel great about it. And I think that's why I've had so much success early on. I get a lot of referrals, and I'm even repeat clients because my clients know that I'm not going to convince them to do something that serves me. I'm going to give them as much possible information as I can get my hands on, so they're making a decision that serves them.
Yeah. Another mentor of mine says the same thing, really, right? It's just generally, hey, listen, like at the end of the day, I'm not going to sell you on anything. I'm just going to provide you with the most amount of information that I can possibly give to you so you can make an educated decision. And that's true, right? I generally agree with that 100%. But listen, so let's roll from this into the hot topic, because I do feel like, more information is kind of relevant to this hot topic, right? Because the more information that people have available to them and what's going to come in 2025, ultimately, I think it's going to help them. And the whole point of this podcast, as we've discussed, is I don't want people in, I don't know, let's say one of the areas you described, right, in Knoxville, to see this and say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is a guy, Robbie, right here, that's boots on the ground every day, folks. Like, he understands that market. The people on the news generally do not. They're looking at national headlines. They're comparing Nashville and Knoxville, and they're trying to associate them. Completely separate markets, completely different things, right? That being said, today's hot topic is going to create a new market for us, right? And so let's describe, I know when we were at EXPCon, we watched, shout out your guy, Ricky Caruth. And what were we doing? Script battle, right? And Ricky had that, the rebuttal or the objection that a lot of people were getting, which is, I'm going to wait until after the election, right? And he just crushed it, asked thoughtful questions. And one of the things I thought he had said, which was awesome, is it's the same, right? That being said, a lot of people don't think that. So what do you think 2025 and a new president coming into office, what is that going to do to the real estate market to you locally in Knoxville, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're going to need to see some economic easing before an administration change is going to make things drastically better. I don't think that there's a light switch that's going to be magically flipped on January 20th. I will say that consumer sentiment in this area, being a predominantly red state, is very positive. That people are very much looking forward to a change. Yeah. And so I would say, when people feel good, they spend money. So I believe that they're going to have a little bit more confidence to make decisions moving forward after the election. But at the same time, I don't see anything economically in the numbers or in the way that things are moving in the market currently that indicates we're going to get this massive surge of transactions, a massive change in interest rates, or even a tightening of inventory. We've seen active listings climb every month for the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. We've seen one of the lowest transaction volume years in a long time, like 2008 low. Yeah. And so when you got low transactions, building inventories, stagnant interest rates sort of all over the place, I don't see this massive change. But when you think about consumer sentiment, and all of a sudden they feel better about, in my geographic area, they feel better about, for the majority of people, they feel better about who's in office. I think we'll see a much more positive year as far as volume rising, and I think we'll see a much more, I would say, a much more balanced market. Like, I think that we're going to see more people doing deals, more people making moves, and a continued influx of people to Knoxville, man. Like, it's wild how many people are still trying to move here.
Yeah, man. I mean, I I moved from New York to Florida, right? So I would say everything you said is the same down here. There's a lot of positive sentiment. One of the things for me that I'm really interested to see, I will say, is the regulation piece of it all.
Mhm.
Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. I got zero idea what's going to happen with interest rates. I mean, if I was a betting man myself, I would say eventually come down. I think they got to tamper inflation. I think a lot of people underestimate what fuel does to inflation, like the cost of fuel.
Mhm.
But that being said, I'd really like to see them lower some regulations on some things in terms of in the building space, right? A lot of these things, they tend to just bog people down in the weeds. And what they also tend to do is create like a lack of competition for like big builders or big business. Like, they
Yeah.
make it really hard for a guy your dad, right? Even now, like they make it real hard to start a contracting company to be able to build homes and do things. So I'm hoping that we see that, and that'll kind of help with some supply and demand. But I don't think you'll see that immediately by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I'll say from a developer standpoint, because I work with quite a few, there's not a bunch of regulation to jump through locally to get permitted. One
Nice.
of the reasons that permits are slowed is just the lack of inspectors. Like they need to be
Yeah.
inspecting projects as they're ongoing. And the last thing you want to do is to be waiting on a material draw from a lender because your plumbing inspection or your rough-in inspection is waiting on an inspector to get out there for a week. Your job's on hold. So I think that the only reason there's an easing in permitting is due to available inspectors. But even with that, man, I mean, we're seeing homes go up in 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Crazy.
take a year and a whole bunch of bureaucracy to get permitted to
Nope.
build a home.
Nope. No, and I agree, right? And ultimately, the other side to it is on the lending side of things, right? There are some regulations that have come into place that were post 2008 that were fantastic, that really
Uh,
fixed a lot of things. But there is some stuff as well where it's generally tougher to get people approved, and I think it needs to be in certain regards. To qualify and things like that. There's certainly like a lack of education, I would say too, in terms of like I hope that they do something there where they help people learn this type of thing, so it's not as much of a foreign language when you go and you sit with Robbie and you say, hey man, I want to buy a house,
mm,
right? Education I think goes a long way, and it's not like, hey, you got to learn about this. That being said, if you know a little bit about your credit score, it helps you in a lot of areas, right?
sure.
So but yeah, I'm optimistic, I would say. And the other thing I would say too is very much on par with what you had said, which I don't expect things to change by January 20th in terms of instant real estate changes. But I do think it's still a good time to buy because
Well, I think closings happen every single day, man. Regardless of market conditions, regardless of who's sitting in the Oval Office, closings happen
for
every day.
sure.
There's not enough. There's not enough agents, in my opinion, that are truly putting the client's best interest first and going after serving as many as they possibly can. And despite the lowest transaction volume, in the last 20 years in this market, really, my business is up 5x. Like
Nice, man. Love it.
serving people will always trump, um, you know, pun intended,
Pun
will
intended.
will always trump being self-serving. And there's no amount of marketing that you can do to overcome bad service.
Dude, what a great line to finish on. I completely agree. People think that we're in the real estate business. We're not. We're in the customer service industry.
Yep.
I don't know when it's amazing to me that certain individuals in our industry don't realize that sometimes.
Right.
But I'm gonna tell you what you don't want to hear with like a smile, and I mean I don't mean it to offend you. I just the truth goes a long way, right, Robbie?
Mhm.
All right, man. Well, listen, obviously we've been running about like 55 minutes now, so we'll go ahead and we'll close it up. I really appreciate your time, man. But in closing, what's one piece of advice that you've got like in your real estate career that maybe somebody that's like a newer agent out there that's watching this, or even somebody that wants to invest like you and I have talked about and get into this type of thing? Like, what is that best piece of advice that you've been given?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my message to new agents is you got to keep things really, really simple. You've got to generate leads. You've got to nurture them and stay in touch with them. You've got to go on appointments. You've got to negotiate deals, and you've got to aggressively and consistently eliminate everything else from your plate. There's so many things that are going to be thrown on your plate right out of the gate. Learning how to run a business, learning how to manage books, learning how to do your taxes, learning how to order real estate signs and create logos. So many distractions. But at the end of the day, the real estate agent that finds the most clients, stays in touch with them the most, negotiates the most deals, goes on the most appointments, closes the most deals. And everything else you can hire support for. And even at some point, you can hire support for that too. So focus on the things that are revenue generating activities with the majority of your time. And your biggest problem will be, who do I need to hire next so that I don't go crazy?
Absolutely.
That would be my advice to the agent. My advice to an investor is you need to have money set aside for a rainy day, prepared for an opportunity. It's better to be prepared for an opportunity and one doesn't come along than to be not prepared and miss one. And I can't tell you in the last 3 years how many times I've had an incredible deal in front of me and I've needed to pass it to another investor because I just didn't have the cash set aside. I was putting everything into getting my business up off the ground and I wasn't preparing to take advantage. And had I been focused on doing both, man, I might have doubled the size of my portfolio in the last 3 years. So you got to keep some cash reserves and be ready to pull the trigger on the right type of opportunity, the type of opportunity you want to specifically pursue. And whether that's developing, rehabbing, buying and holding rental properties, doing midterm rentals or short-term rentals, getting into commercial or, multifamily, you got to have some cash if you want to play. So that'd be my biggest piece there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would caveat that with, or add to it, not caveat it, right? Add to it, get to meetups, man. If they're in your area, get to real estate meetups. I mean, there wasn't a lot available in my hometown. I was doing a lot more webinar based stuff. Bigger Pockets always gets a shout out from me because they're great. You learn just so much stuff there, but even so, man, like, what I've been discovering is there are a lot of guys who are a lot further ahead, and what they've got and what you need are a lot of times aligned, right? A lot of these guys have a lot of deals and they have a lot of capital, but they need more. They want more deal flow. So, hey, go get to a meetup, partner with a guy that's a little bit ahead of you, right? He'll bring the money, you bring the hustle, and it's a magical combination for sure. Well, obviously, hey, I just recommended Bigger Pockets, which I always do to anybody, but can you recommend like a podcast or a book, something that's helped you learn a little bit about real estate, or you feel that's important for business?
Yeah, man. I think that if there's a real estate agent or an entrepreneur out there watching this, 10X is Easier Than 2X is a book that you absolutely have to read. It is a book that'll have you thinking bigger and stop doing activities that are only going to do addition to your business and start doing activities that are going to bring multiplication and geometric progression as far as growth. When you start thinking bigger, that book will make you think big. And when you start thinking bigger and you start seeing a bigger vision and a bigger future for your life, it's so much easier to take the action that you need to start the momentum, right? You need momentum. And once you've got that momentum, get the pedal to the metal and just go for it. Because that book specifically, I will credit with the reason I've had so much growth this year. Right after I finished reading it, everything exploded for me because I just stopped doing the things that were killing my momentum. I was doing a lot of little tasks that weren't bringing me a return on time. And the most valuable resource you have is your time. So understanding how to manage that and invest it properly in big ideas and big impact moves. 10X is Easier Than 2X. Read that book.
Who wrote that?
I believe it's Benjamin Hardy. Had it right in front of me, I'd tell you. I believe it's Benjamin Hardy.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, and listen, I'll throw it in the bottom in the description as well. But in addition to that, the last piece for you, Robbie, where can people find you, follow you, subscribe to you, all the good stuff?
Well, yeah, man. So this all started for me on TikTok. I started creating videos on TikTok. It's where most of my followers and most of my engagement is, and that's Robbie underscore Baker on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, and I am heavily focused in 2025 on growing my audience on Instagram. Don't know what's going to happen with TikTok in the coming year. So Robbie Baker underscore Realtor, you see it on the screen. Follow me on Instagram, shoot me a DM, let's connect. I'd be happy to help in any way that I can.
And for anybody in that Knoxville area, I could not recommend Robbie enough. Him and I had the pleasure of getting to know each other, meet each other, and just really just shoot the shit, man. Pardon my French, but just shoot the shit about real estate. And I tell you, like, the amount of knowledge that you have accumulated, and then you tell me you've only been in the game for like 3 years. I was like, what? Didn't even make sense, man. So shout out to you. I'm wishing you nothing but the best for 2025. And thanks so much for stopping by, dude.
Yeah, man. Best part of EXPCon was meeting you, bro. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Same to you, dude. Same to you.